and I trust that today is going to be no different. My name is Natasha Muhoza. I am speaking to you from Nairobi. So hello to you wherever you are, whatever time it is over there. For some of you, it might be too early. I hope you're energized still for the conversation. And I hope you're in great health considering the strange times. We are delighted to have all of you. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us today. And of course, I welcome everyone that is joining us from around the world on our different social media platforms. You are most welcome today. And I know for sure that the phenomenal Mark Edo, who is moderating from Norway, am I correct? Yes, will take us through some thrilling, thought-provoking conversation today, and hopefully conversation that will prompt some real action towards the growth of Africa, the power that taps into the power of its people and resources and creative spirit. So now I will just take you through some house rules for both panelists and attendees. So to our panelists, I request that you keep your audio on mute unless you have the floor to speak, so to speak. And also just know that when video is playing at any point, you will be automatically muted. So please remember to unmute yourself. Also, kindly keep your remarks within the time limits that you are allocated as guided by the moderator, especially as today we have such a tight schedule of events running throughout the day. To our attendees, of course, we want this session to be as engaging as possible. So please send in your questions. There is a Q&A and a chat icon on your screen. Please use those, and we'll make sure our panelists and special guests get to them and respond to them to as many as possible. So of course, finally, let us have some fun as we celebrate Africa and move towards Africa Integration Day. Over to you, Mark. You are muted still. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, that's not how I mean to go on. I'll start again. This is my voice, and I am indeed in the very cold climes of Norway, trapped here in Norway, in Oslo, but we're traveling without moving. I want to welcome everybody to what's going to be a very interesting session. Now, this session is called Reinventing African Storytelling. But before we begin, I must tell you about the AU and the Afro Champions Art Initiative, named after Africa's most mysterious and inspiring queen, Nefertiti. The images that you're about to see are just some of the submissions to the BOMAS competition to uncover Africa's artistic talent. Now, the grand prize is a whopping $50,000 investment in your next project if you win, if you submit and you win. And now I'd like to show you a video that gives you a flavor of this exciting creative arts project. I'm going to ask the technicians to please roll that video.
Africa, with over 2,000 languages, this massive continent is also renowned as the cradle of civilization. The continent is oozing with cultural diversity, and that the creative arts are the new gold. The African Union and the Afro Champions Initiative are using art with a connection to Africa's heritage, and this is to help transform the modern condition of the continent. Therefore, BOMA of Africa launched a prize program to uncover artistic visions and discover talent with a $50,000 grand prize for investments into the winner's new project.
Africa's future is in its past. How will your Africa look like in 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now? Well, Kevin Karithi from Kenya provides a vivid simulation. Beautification and movement in the time of confinement. Cherie Jackson, Senegal, presents us with this beautiful piece. Do our limitations stir our creative juices so that we produce beauty? What do you see? The codes of yesterday. What binds us from moving forward? Is it the codes of yesterday? Vincent Kolo from Nigeria's art poses this enlightening question. The haunting expression on the subject's face speaks volumes. The foresight of an African youth. Do we have the tools to envision a better future? One that will uplift each and every African, making use of our gifts and talents and dreams. Art by Nuruddin, Popola, Nigeria. As we continuously travel to our past to discover our future, will we discover our true selves? Submission by Dawuda Olamelekan Yusuf. Harnessing our differences. In a refreshingly intricate collage, Njem Adorno from Ghana illustrates the beauty in diversity and strength in unity. Praise Ojewala, Nigeria, expresses unity despite the difference in ethnicities through the details of his art. Africa's endless magical beauty in 1,000 ways. From the resplendent colors to the authentic African subject in his art, Joseph Mutuku Kenya celebrates unity, culture, beauty, and love. What's your story? Acknowledging and embracing our differences for unity. Alex Niragara from Burundi portrays the richly diverse culture of the Africans in his enthralling patterns, designs, and details. Beautiful unity. Cassandra Tete Ghana uses color, texture, and a whole lot of emotions to paint this masterpiece, displaying different African places. The prize program is helping unearth creative and artistic talent. The partners intend to leverage the talent to enlist corporations and big institutions across Africa into this long neglected and now urgent task of changing the narrative of Africa through creative actions and not just words.
Africa's future is in its past. Indlela ibuza kwa wapambili. That is a Zulu proverb that is translated as, the way forward is to ask those who have gone before.
Nefertiti, my beloved, sweet, sweet, sweet of love, lady of all women, of all grace.
Artists Laureate Program, where top artists are shortlisted through the Creative Arts Prize Program. And of course, through an open call for artists will be announced in July 2020. And these artists will be posted to major corporations and regional institutions to work closely with their marketing and branding departments. The AU and the Afro Champions are aiming at an objective to infuse authentic African artistry into the communications and identities of these prominent African corporate and institutional champions.
Wow, truly amazing. Truly amazing. Wonderful stuff. I'm sure you felt that as well. Some incredible artwork there from across Africa. And if you do actually want to send anything in yourself, please do so, because it's an opportunity for your art to be seen across the world. And just to recap exactly what that means, there are many parts to the Nefertiti initiative, which were explained there. And the idea is actually to infuse Nefertiti together with corporates across Africa. That's followed by a project aimed at working with the corporations to develop projects that blend technology, history, and heritage and art. And the aim is to move advertising spending away from the generic towards advertising that draws on truly African strengths. And then finally, the Nefertiti initiative will explore the fusion of new and traditional media and literature in a variety of forms so that we can help ourselves as Africans rediscover authentic storytelling traditions as a tool to deepen bonds across the continent. Now that leads me to today's session on Showcase Day of the BOMA Virtual Festival. It is Reinventing African Storytelling. And our panel is made up of four creative entrepreneurs who are very passionate about the power of storytelling to transform our continent. And they are Deborah or Debbie Ahenkora of African Bureau Stories, Herman Chineri Hess of African Echoes and Soft Tribe, Ifoma Dike of IDD UK, and Jide Martin of Comic Republic. You're all very welcome to this session on African storytelling. Now, you'll all agree with me that now in Africa in 2020, it's brought with it a unique moment in our history. The global pandemic of COVID-19 is really laying bare the limits of our infrastructure in many African countries. It's exposing weak governance structures, social inequalities, the fragility of our social, our economic and healthcare systems, and just how precarious the labor market is in Africa. We face a very uncertain future coming out of 2020. Now, from education to regional integration, this session looks at how storytelling can be part of the solution to achieve the dream of the Africa that we want. And we're asking, how can we harness the power of storytelling to educate our children and indeed ourselves to inspire excellence, to get that sense of unity and integration that we're looking for, and to chart and control our own destiny across countries and indeed across continents? How do we fuse the most modern of technology with the oldest traditional ways of storytelling to create something new, to create powerful tools that can elevate us and elevate our continent? Now, what I'm going to do is ask my four distinguished guests to, first of all, introduce yourself, because no one knows you like yourself. So I'm going to ask you to briefly introduce yourselves and what you do, what your passions are. And then I'm going to ask you to speak on this subject of reinventing African storytelling for 3 minutes. Now, we'll have to be strict because timekeeping is of the essence. So just for 3 minutes, 3 minutes on reinventing African storytelling. But first of all, tell us who you are and what you do. I'll begin with Debbie. Go ahead, Debbie.
Hello, everyone. I work in the space of children's literature. I consider myself a champion of African stories for children, and um, my life's work is to ensure that children across the continent can find stories well produced, accessible, in which they see, their faces, their cultures, their food, their slang, and I'm convinced that as a continent, look to, get out of poverty, create new wealth, the creative economy is one of our biggest opportunities because it's not a finite resource. We all have our creativity, and if we can find a way to put business principles in place in the creative economy, and for my interest in the children's creative economy, I think we can make the gains that we hope to make. So over the past 12 years, I've run two organizations. The first one is Golden Baobab, which organizes the prestigious Golden Baobab Prize, which is an annual award that discovers, supports, and nurtures African writers and illustrators. And we've also started a children's publishing house, African Bureau Stories, that produces African stories that children will love to read. So that's in short about me. I think you're on mute, Mark.
Sorry about that. It's the second time I've done that. Okay, move on to Herman now. Herman Chineri Hess of Africa. Echoes and Soft Tribe, what is that? I understand that you're using audiobooks. It's a big part of what you're doing, audiobooks. Tell us about what you do and tell us why you do it and speak on the subject of storytelling for 3 minutes, Herman. Herman, I think you may be on mute as well. Is Herman with us? Yes. We can't hear you, Herman. You're on mute, Herman. If you unmute your mic. We still can't hear Herman. So I think I'll ask Herman, if I could ask you, whilst you sort out your audio, I think I'll go to Ifoma DK, and then we'll come back to you, Herman. So Ifoma, you have the floor, Ifoma. IDD UK.
Mute myself, I think. Yes, thank you, Mark. My name is Ifoma DK. As you know, I am an art advisor, curator, and source. I sort of created Idioblast Dynamic Development UK Limited, which is the IDD, to create an alternative platform to showcase artists, especially artists who live outside the catchment areas of art. So for example, those who are in the countryside or in rural areas who do not get the sort of visibility that artists who live in the city would have. And also, everybody who works in the art knows that it's a very elite setting and not very accessible. So sort of breaking down those barriers, because I felt that making art accessible will ensure that artists become more successful, because it wasn't realistic in the way it was working. And the second reason why I created the business was also to create an alternative income stream for artists, because from my research and listening to a lot of the collectors, I think a lot of the real collectors were frustrated about the commercialization of art. And I thought that perhaps if artists have an alternative way of earning an income outside painting, doing their work, then perhaps that could sort of ease the way they tend to churn out work. And so using my corporate clients and having away days facilitated by artists through studio tours, art workshops, and in conversations with artists. I mean, promoting art and culture is my passion. It's especially art from our continent, and also giving art, our art and artists, the value they deserve rather than what others, you know, think the value is. And so that's what I do in the nutshell. And just quickly, I was going through the video because sometimes artists also forget what their role is in sort of promoting or highlighting, giving our history visibility. A lot of the artists had symbols and stuff, you know, painted on their body, and those are historic or pre-colonial writing symbols. I think if they give us, you know, tell stories around that, you know, and what inspired such creativity, that will also help in the education of not just our children, adults, and people who like art but do not understand. I mean, you know, there's so much we can do, you know, within our various roles. But anyway, I will stop now, but that's just me in the nutshell.
Fantastic. I'm going to come back to you on that issue of actually, sometimes it seems that the artists themselves, talk less of the viewers, are subconsciously using, or they're mining history, but they're not sort of recognizing actually where it's from. So it's about sort of even educating the artists to understand how to magnify and amplify history and not lose opportunities sometimes through their art. I think that's what you're saying, and it's an interesting subject that we'll come back to. I don't know if Herman's mic is working. I'd like to go back to Herman if I can, because Herman's doing something very interesting with African Echoes and Soft Tribe. We were speaking earlier about it. Herman, is your mic working now? Can we hear you?
Just give Herman a few minutes as he sets up. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Then I'll move on. We've heard a little bit from Deborah and Ifoma. Now I'll move on to Jide. Jide Martin, I am a comic enthusiast, and I grew up with comics as a child. I was crazy about them. They fell to the wayside for a while until Marvel Comics and all the rest of it came back. And African, a lot of people don't know, is African comics have been around for a long time, and there is something of a history to African comics. Now, this is your bread and butter. First of all, tell us what you're doing, and for a second, just touch on this. Let's get started on this subject of how storytelling can be one of the major ways for us to achieve this Africa that we want. Jide.
All right, thank you very much for having me. So I'm Jide Martin. I'm the CEO of Comic Republic. Comic Republic is presently, and I say that with statistics, the biggest comic outfit out of Africa. We release a comic book every 2 weeks. We have over 100 characters on our platform. We have fans around the world. We pull in investment from places like France, Europe, Singapore. We have an app. We have also, if you visit our website, www.thecomicrepublic.com, you'll be able to download or visit our site, and we give out our comics free, which we release every 2 weeks. We've successfully been able to do this because we have focused on one thing. We say that we're not just an African company or comic company. We're not, hello?
Bear with me a second, Jide. Is that Herman? Herman, if that is you, is that Herman? If so, could you mute your mic, and we'll come to you in a moment.
Okay.
Sorry, Jide, carry on.
So we say that we're not only, we're not an African comic company. We're a comic company that happens to be African. And why do we say this? We have one goal, is to put Africa's best foot forward and to take Africa to the world. We seem to forget that Africa is no longer a continent, but a global community. We have Africans in diaspora in every corner of the world. And I think a lot of us are forgetting that when we are talking about being African or about African issues, we have to take it from a global perspective, because we have Africans everywhere. And the world, you know, has now become this very simple and dynamic, connected place where you cannot isolate yourself alone, but, you know, enhance yourself for the rest of the world to see it. But that being said, most people don't understand the importance that comics have to play today. And, you know, there's a principle that most people don't understand, that we are who we are because of habits. Every single thing we do and every time we respond to a situation is something that we have learned. You know, we are given a question and then we answer the question by the things we have in our archives. Countries like the United States have spent decades conditioning their people with things like superheroes. And the United States, for example, were the first people to come out with comics. They have Superman, they have Wonder Woman, they have Captain America, of which, if you look at it, they're all wearing the colors of the American flag. Yes. And so with those superheroes, they've been able to convince the world that they're the superpowers and that they can save the world. My question is, why don't we do the same? Why don't we use African heroes and start to show the world and ourselves what Africans can do and what Africans can be? But even moving a little bit forward in that, the creative industry around the world, apart from the continent of Africa, have affected and brought in so much resource into the country by ways of movie production, animation, films. Most 30-year-olds today will tell you they know Naruto. That's a character from the Asian continent, right? And they've sold billions and they've made so much money from that. Why are we not doing that to the world? Thereby bringing economical impact not only to the continent, not only to each country, but to the creatives themselves. All of this is what we're trying to do at Comic Republic. I could go on and on about it, but I'll just stop here.
I can't help but continue to ask you, though, why are we not doing it? I mean, I'm sold. I understand the power of that. I understand the power of imagery. It's not just as distractions in our eyes and sweet things in our ears. It's actually more, it's much deeper than that. You talk about DC Comics and Marvel Comics post-war, changing the narrative of what America was and positioning America. Can we just transplant that concept straight into African countries and the continent and get the same response?
Yes, we can. But the thing is, we need people to step up, you know, and do the foundational work, which is what we're trying to do at Comic Republic. The truth is, the people that we're looking up to have had people who fought for these various industries. Let's even look at the industries that we have in Nigeria today. Let's look at the banking sector. Let's look at the farming. Let's look at the people who are into property. These are industries that have been built over years. But yet, we want, you know, we're looking at an industry and yet nobody's ready to make the investment, make the sacrifice. And this is both from the government level and the individual level into the creative sector. It's one of the things I've vouched my life to do. It is why the only thing I do is comics. And I'm not looking at the comics as a product. I'm looking at the comics as IPs that we can use to tell our stories and turn into things like gaming, films. But it has to start from somewhere. People need to lay the groundwork. Things don't just break down. Things don't just build up. It takes a period of time. For you to create a generational shift, it takes about 30 years. Look at it. The guys who are reading comics today, the guys who are going for the Avenger movies, the guys who are watching Naruto, and most of the things we've imbibed are mostly in the ruling class, the 30 to 40-year-olds. These are guys who have been watching or looking at DC Comics since they were, 5 or 10? This is 30 years building. We need to start putting the little steps now. We need to stop being afraid. As Africans, we are too bothered about what we're going to eat today instead of creating a foundation. And that is the basic problem. And then when you go to the people, the government or the institutions, and you come with a viable business plan, the problem is what they know is invest in banking, invest in land. But they don't understand, for example, Black Panther alone made over $1 billion. That is more than the GDP or the investment rate of most of the African nations. And that if we bring this to Africa, a lot of games, a lot of movies need storyboarding. And most of these people come from places like Asia, India. We have people who can supply the world with all of this artistic content right here. We need to build a market for it. Nobody else will do it but us. Most of the clients we have at Comic Republic, and we're doing very well, is from foreign clients. I hate to say it, but it's the truth. We get 90% of our revenue. We're existing as a company today because of people like BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, DW, our people back in Nigeria are not investing in the infrastructure. Every single penny I've gotten, I've put back into paying artists to continue to turn out this content. And because of this, we've created, we've put ourselves on the map. We've been able, artists have been able to create a sustainable living. We've had people who have been exported to other countries to do the same thing that they started doing with us, simply because we had the courage to lay the groundwork. So it is very transferable.
Now, let me interrupt you there. Let me interrupt you because you bring up a very important point about the business of storytelling. And I must say, when we're talking about superheroes, you look like one yourself. You're so passionate, sitting on that red chair. You look like an Avenger. Now, I want to find out if Herman is with us finally. Herman, are you with us? This is my third try now to see if we can hear Herman.
I should be here. Can you hear me now?
Praise the Lord. There you are. Okay. Herman,
finally.
Herman, I know who you are, but
do you?
Yes, but can you tell everyone else who you are? Because I mean, we're talking about something that resonates very much with you, Herman. We're talking about breaking through the barriers, storytelling not just as entertainment or distractions, but as a viable business from, as they would say in agriculture, from farm to fork, the whole value chain of how to make this an engine which is both a business, but is also something that is integral to the very progress of Africa and the sense of self and the sense of unity that we have in Africa. So vital beyond what I think sometimes storytelling is perceived to be. You're living and breathing this every day. You're devoting your life and your life's work to it. Tell us what you're doing and tell us why.
Okay, traditionally I've run a software company, payroll systems, accounting systems, that kind of boring stuff. The latest thing I'm doing, however, is what I would hope would be considered my life's work. We're doing this thing called African Echoes. We're doing it out of our offices in Sierra Leone. I normally operate from Ghana, but this we're doing out of our Sierra Leone office. Basically, it's always been, I was always a slow reader. I liked the information. I just couldn't get it into my head quickly enough. So I've used a lot of audio and audiovisual resources all my life. And I realized that most of the people in Africa, I'll say a good 50%, can't read or write. It's just our stage of development. Now, that people cannot read or write, it doesn't render them stupid. They just can't read and write, that's all. We're writing on tablets, but now we have hard drives, we have the cloud, we have microphones. The only reason why we were writing was because that was the technology of the day. It is just a means to convey information into people's heads. Now, what that meant to me was that, wait a second, we have mobile phones in our hands. I can suddenly dispense information and knowledge and stories through the mobile phone. So we set up this thing called African Echoes. Now, what we essentially do is that we pick up regular Africans. Most of them can't even speak an international language or English or French or anything like that. They tell us stories in local language. We have a team that packages the stories, and then we translate these stories. We basically tidy them up and translate them into African language, and then also into the big languages, English, French, Mandarin, and that kind of thing. And we sell over the phone. And this is what we're doing. But it's very exciting because, this whole thing should be launching around December. You will find very soon a millionaire old lady in a village in northern Nigeria who's just sold 3 million books in China. And the downloads will make her very wealthy, and she's buying Rolls Royces. She hasn't stolen anything. She told her story in Hausa, and nothing to do with anybody. The government will even be shocked. Who are these people making money in the village? And it's easy to transport the product. If it was cassava, we'll have to lift it, take it to the harbor. Bribes will be collected there. Permits will be required. But we bypassed all that by making the whole thing electronic. It's very exciting. We're getting some wonderful, there's a Kenyan lady. I walked into the office the other day. There's a young lady from Kenya who's in her 20s who was telling us stories about flying in Somalia, doing 8 drops And one of the places where they dropped them, each time they got there, the station manager gave them a Colt 45 gun. And her and the co-pilot would be, they said, oh, is that to shoot anybody who attacks us? She said, no. The guy would tell us, if you see the Al-Shabaab coming, you shoot him, then shoot yourself, because you don't want to know what they'll do to your body. These kinds of stories, very, very interesting stories coming up. So we are very excited. We're also engaged with a textbook publisher. They are looking to deploy, we've signed a few contracts, they're going to deploy textbooks on our platform. Can you imagine having a situation where you can dispense a literature book in Fanti? The level of understanding and the improvement in grades, because there's suddenly no need to go through English as a medium to somebody who doesn't really understand English. So in certain cases, we're actually doing it like the churches. They read in English, then they read local language. They read in English, they read in local language, which will improve English for the kids and so on. And there's going to be no more discrimination, because it'll be like, it's like we own Penguin Books, it's owned by Africans, and it's looking at Africa. So we won't be discriminated. We will understand the African stories, and everybody will get a chance. I mean, for example, Nkrumah's books are all coming on our platform. All our parents who are old and dying, all their life stories are coming on our platform. And we're able to produce books in like a week, 2 weeks, boom, a book is out. So it's going to be very prolific. So we're very excited about it. And it'll make money too. And everybody makes money. From the old lady in the village who told the initial story, to the young graduates who put it together as a book, to the computer programmers, to the payment system, to everybody's making money. So we're happy about that.
It's a very, very, very exciting. Herman, I'll ask you to switch your microphone back on to mute now. And I want to go to Debbie, and I want to stay on this subject of the business of storytelling. There's a lot of other areas we'll touch on in the moment, but that business of storytelling and its ecosystem, the ecosystem that's needed for that to happen. I mean, both Ifoma, Jide, and Herman have all sort of touched on it in their own way. But you work in children's literature, and then these types of conversations, often we forget about the kids when we're talking about things. We forget about children's literature and children when we're talking about the business of storytelling. I know that you've got a lot of thoughts on that. I'm going to give you the floor for a few minutes to give them to us. Debbie, you're on mute, I think, as well.
Okay, yeah, I agree with most of what we've said already, and I think Jide, I agree so much with a lot of what you said in terms of the fact that we do need an ecosystem. The fact that we want to see children all over the continent with our own books, and for these books to be in the hands of children across the world is a very lofty goal. But under that goal need to be pillars, need to be an ecosystem, need to be the designers who know how to design a book cover and a book that will reach.
Can I ask you, so there's somebody who's got their mic on. I'm sorry about this. I think
that's fine. I think we're muted back, yeah. So for me, the conversation about that ecosystem is the most important conversation. It's almost the goal and the process to the goal. And when we don't put resources into that ecosystem, when we don't highlight what those are, we still fall short of the main goal. So in my case, I've run a literature prize for 12 years. And in this prize, we would ask writers to submit stories. And the goal was that we would get those stories published. We would get stories from across the continent, and we would pick the best one, and we would go to local publishers, international publishers, and we would say, these are the best stories. We need you to publish the stories. And they say, these stories still need a whole lot of work. Who's training these writers? And there's no one training these writers to produce these children's stories. Who's training artists in the art of illustration for children? And we don't have people doing those trainings. So then we, the same people, now have to do those trainings. So then we come and start investing into workshops for writers and illustrators, connecting them to creative art directors, to editors, to help them to take their craft to the next level, right? Then we finish that, we go back to the publishers, and then they say, well, we're going to invest in this, but we're going to create it as a school book. But we're not looking to create school books. We're looking to create fiction that delight and captivate children. We don't want to be put in the, in the fixed box of academics, so that we become our own publisher, so that we can create these books in the way that we want to delight children. So when that ecosystem is in there, players like us who want to make an impact tend to have to do everything else. You just can't be a publisher. You've also got to be the one finding the stories, the one training the people, the one doing the editorial work. And that puts a lot of obstacles in the way. Whereas, industries that are achieving the goals that we are hoping to achieve have those ecosystems because they've been built over a long time. So when we talk today about, reinventing African storytelling, and we talk about the role of technology, etc., it's almost as if we're talking about it like those, we can reinvent it today and tomorrow we have a different outcome. But that doesn't work. What we have to reinvent are the processes and the ecosystem and invest in them so that, those processes can deliver us the outcomes that we want. And when it comes to children's literature and children's stories, children's books, it saddens my heart so much. And this is something that we've all heard about, how we grew up reading the Enid Blytons, we grew up reading the Nancy Drews and the Hardy Boys. And the sad thing is that the children today, my little boy, is growing up reading just different versions of the same foreign tales, because we still don't have, 30 years later, our own stories easily accessible for children. And it's not rocket science. It's not rocket science to ensure that we have our own stories and those stories can be accessed by children everywhere. The only issue is that there's a lack of will. We are not putting our money where our mouths are. We are not putting our time and our investment, where our mouths are. And until that happens, 30 years later, there'll be another panel just like this, having the same conversation about the same problem, because we didn't invest in the right place.
And when you say we don't invest, let's identify what these frustrating barriers are, because as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, well, if you look at a lot of the great content that comes out of Africa in, say, music, for example, it often sort of mimics Western stories. It mimics Western influence, which is fine. I mean, a lot of it is a reinterpretation, Afrobeat, and interpretation of hip hop and so on and so forth with African flavors. But it doesn't draw to the degree that it could from African history. So this lack of a connection to African storytelling, or the ability to relate African storytelling, permeates everything, other aspects of art and aspects of ourselves. There are these barriers you talk about. Am I clear to say then that these barriers are trying to grab by their lapels the money men, businesses, private sector, investors, banks, and all those individuals that control the commerce, so to speak, and then their sort of bedfellows, governments, policymakers, people who are in the business of running countries. And those two camps are yet to fully wake up or be convinced or come along on this journey. I mean, this is something that, in 30 years, if you don't solve that problem, then we'll be in 30 years' time talking about these opportunities again. Maybe I could turn to Ifoma now, because as I recall, I met Ifoma about 10 years ago. And at that time, she was had a very successful business selling art in the commercial world, as I recall. And they've come a long way since then. So the travails of trying to wake people up when it comes to understanding the value of art, indeed, because it's been your stock in trade for a decade or so. So I just want you to come in on this question of what are the barriers, and who are the barriers, and how can we overcome them? Ifoma.
I think I agree with Jide. So his stumbling blocks are our people, really. So I'll give an example. About 5, 6, 7 years ago, I had worked by Njideka Kunyili, They were going for maybe 30, 35 grand. And I approached some of my African collectors and they thought, oh, it's too expensive. Oh, you know, I don't think she'll ever be so successful, etc. But went to my Europeans, they sort of bought into, you know, her as an artist and bought the work. 5 years later, she's going for 3 million. And so the lack of belief or trust in our own people, I mean, requiring the global audience, you know, people from the West to actually identify the strengths or the what do you call it, the talent in us before we make anything of it is quite disappointing. I would say nobody can teach us who we are. People can have ideas of who we are, but nobody can tell us who we are or what we need. It is something that we need to find out for ourselves. But my thing is, how do you know yourself if you have stopped learning history, if you do not know where you're coming from, if you have no idea of your history, and when you do, you're replicating the Western ideas of who you are.
Yes.
You know, the Western ideas of, you know, the Mungo Park, you know, discovering River Niger, and you wonder, my God, where did the Asaba and Onitsha, how did they, you know, how did they do business? And things like that. And I think it, sadly, it still happens today. And that's what we're inculcating in our children and young people. And so if they have no idea of who they are, where they come, you know, where they've come from, how do you convince them of their value? Do you understand? And it is what we're going through with the corporates, you know, in various parts of Africa, and various sort of institutions within Africa. How do you convince them if they do not believe in themselves? And so, thank God I'm still here, not thanks to my African people, but, you know, the Europeans who actually see. And my passion is Africa, and I'm determined to convince my people that, you know.
Are you frustrated? You sound slightly frustrated.
I am very frustrated.
On the table here, right?
This is a controlled me, you know. I am very frustrated, but they all know me now. I just go banging on doors, you know, the GT banks of the world, they know me. I mean, and I speak quite openly. I'm not politically correct. I'm quite blunt, and I stay authentic in myself and my passion. And so I think, you know, it also increased my clientele, my African clientele, quite frankly, because they've gone to see, I mean, they've seen my history, my track record, and I don't advertise anywhere. My work speaks for itself. And the fact that I could actually sell a piece of work by an African artist for the same value as their European contemporary is something, because they're constantly undervalued. And for me, it's just to prove that if you bring the right quality of work, you know, and people are moved by it, they will pay anything for it. And so far, it is what I've proved. But now we just need to highlight, we need to use platforms like Gide's platforms, like Herman's platform, like what Debbie is doing, as a tool to educate. You know, we also, another frustration that I have, I'm doing a documentary at the moment about modern artists. Where are the women? Where are the women, you know? I'm really frustrated. You know, you go to Lagos, you know Nike, Mama Nike's gallery. Yes. Again, she's an embodiment of art. Everything you see from her gele to her, the tie and that she was, she's a sculptor and a painter. Yes. And outside that, she believes, she's so passionate about what she does, so much so that she has invested her own money in creating centers, you know, art centers in rural areas to promote, you know, underprivileged people. Do you understand? And her frustration again is funding. Who will support her? No, a lot of the funding and support she gets comes from outside. How disgraceful is that? Do you understand? So we need to start believing in our own people, you know, and the strength and power that comes from us. Until we do that, it's just really going to be tough to get the international respect that we deserve. I mean, look at the whole thing with the Black Lives Matter and the whole COVID thing. I mean, you know, in reality, how do people respect us if we are struggling to respect ourselves or find value in ourselves? So until we collectively realize the value in us, I don't see how we can bypass this. It is quite frustrating.
Ben Okri, the writer of who won the Booker Prize for Famished Road, the Nigerian writer, once said, "To poison a nation, poison its stories. A demoralized nation tells demoralized stories to itself." He also said, "Beware of the storytellers who are not fully conscious of the importance of their gifts and who are irresponsible in the application of their art." I mean, the thing is that we're talking about almost a life and death situation in terms of us owning these stories and transmitting these stories. To poison a nation, poison its stories, because it falls in on itself, our own perception of ourselves. We start to eat ourselves to a great degree and imbue this negative stereotype that comes from outside, and it percolates within. It's a very dangerous thing not to take storytelling seriously and to win this battle, to put it at the center of really everything we do. Jide, come in there, because I know that this is, you've spoken briefly about this in your intro. I'll give you the mic to say some more.
You've hit it really. We really don't understand the danger that we have by not, pushing things like where Deborah is coming from in the first place. Just even think about it. For every parent, we have 2 kids. So we basically have a minimum of at least 4 kids in every home against 2 parents, right? Statistics shows that Africa is a youth majority continent. So what this means is that sooner or later, your views, my views will not matter because we're simply outnumbered, right? Now, also, these youths are the ones who are going to be in charge in less than 10 to 20 years. If we do not capture their minds now. And this is the other thing that creatives don't understand. You cannot force people to take your content. You have to give your content and meet them at the needs of the users. This means we must find ways to communicate to these children where they're interested. Now, you can't expect a kid who has grown up on Disney cartoons to be loyal to your continent, to your cause, to come back and invest in your country. No, they grew up finding out that Europe and America is the best place to be. That to be upright and to be trustworthy, you need to deal with people from other continents. Hence, no hope or no loyalty to the country where they come from. And so we need to start shifting the minds of the young people, meeting them at the places where they have fun with things like children content, children comics. And Deborah, I must tell you, if you're looking for, we have a network of over 200 creatives who focus on these things because that's what we are building and we can do it effectively. But even as a country, our leaders today do not, the problem is they do not understand it. Their mind frames are not there, which is why when it comes to countries' resources, ratings financially, most African countries will still be playing the back burner because we're still relying strictly on our natural resources. 2 of the richest people in the world, let's look at Mark Zuckerberg or even Jeff Bezos. They are not making money from natural resources. No. They're making money from intellectual property. They are the richest people in the world. When will the people in power today, even if it's for the sake of money, start to invest in the things that are not physical, that are intellectual, that are properties that can be shared worldwide and that can be developed? But even at the stage of skill development, because you can't get people who are going to develop skills to world grade level just overnight. You need to get them interested in it while they're young, and over time, because of interest, because of income, they will improve their skill and their capacity to trade worldwide with things that do not matter, that do not rest on resources that can finish or that can be diminished. Even if no matter where an African is in the world, they should be able to, I live in London, but my company is in Nigeria. And yet most of my clients, okay, so even talking about Black Lives Matter, I was speaking to an investor in London and he was saying, Black Lives Matter means something completely different to Nigerians, right? Because in Nigeria, we have not been oppressed by anyone else. We have been oppressed by ourselves. Yeah. You try to get any business policy across to people who are only interested in oil or politics, and they're going to shut you down. And even if you try to do it yourself, things like bribery and corruption will almost cripple you. So I don't think the government of the day understands the what they're doing now to the creative industry, how detrimental it is to the community, how detrimental it is to our self-esteem, our self-development, our intellectual development altogether, and how it is constantly drawing us back. If we have a generation of people, the 5, 10 years old today, if they believe in the country, if they believe that Nigeria is the best place to be, if they've been told stories about how it is to be successful in Nigeria, how Nigerians are trustworthy, how Nigerians can save the world, 30 years time, you'll find a community that is a world leader. But we need to start today. We need our leaders to invest infrastructure, time, and it's not a thing where you make money immediately. It's a thing where you're putting the investments and the infrastructure down so that you don't have to do it and we don't have to have this discussion in 10 years.
It seems as though one of the things I see is that, you know, and I always think that colonialism left us with many terrible legacies, but one of them is this propensity for us to work in silos, for us to work individually, for us to be divided and conquered in many ways, and not act in a unified manner. And I think that because the reason I bring that up is because what you're saying and what all of you are saying echoes to what I've heard from some private sector people. I was speaking to recently at on the fringes of the African Union Summit before COVID hit in January in Addis. I was speaking to a Malian businessman who was talking about how he sees culture, an African culture, and combining, finding a way for the young people to connect to African culture, to understand the first democracy was created in Africa, the first university in Timbuktu, and all these things people don't know, and fusing it with modern technology and things that are sort of cherry-picked, curated from the West, in the same way the Japanese do it, right? Merging it together to create something new. And then that was his vision. And this was a businessman, a cold, straightforward business guy who was already seeing it. And I've heard it here, there, and everywhere, all in people's different silos, but there doesn't seem to be one unified space for all this energy to come together to be something, to be a force. And am I mistaken, or is there somewhere I haven't been invited to? I don't know if anybody wants to come in there, but I mean, there's power and strength in unity and pulling all these people together, the Jides of the world, this Malian businessman of the world, as a force that can actually make this change. Maybe somebody wants to come in. Herman.
Okay, here. I think that given the technology, the state of play of technology today, this can be achieved even without heavy investors, even without government policy. We tend to do business. We are very pragmatic. We tend to do business with what exists. So if you look at what I described, everything along the chain already exists. Mobile phones exist. People who want to tell stories exist. Unemployed graduates who studied English in school and history and so on, who can write well, they exist. Enough electricity exists to run 20 laptops that we use to process the raw stories. The internet exists and payment platforms exist. So to a large extent, I'll say one just has to be a little innovative and to think outside the box a bit. And suddenly we can distribute content and create this utopia that we're looking for. So I don't like depending on, I'm like Jide, I don't trust the bribe takers and so on. They impede business. So I don't tend to want to fight them. I tend to want to work around them. And in today's technological age, there are lots of gaps and lots of nooks and crannies through which one can operate without engaging the system.
Okay, so I want to go to the subject of education now, and
Mark, if I could just also add to what Herman has said on this topic, because I think it's very important, and I'm surprised that before this conversation my paths haven't crossed with Ifeoma or with Jide, because we're saying Herman, we are both in Accra, so I know Herman. But we're all saying the same thing, but we're still operating in silos. And I think it's a shame, and I intend to change it. After this conversation, I'm going to reach out to everyone. But I think it's largely because kind of like Maslow's theory of needs. When you're still dealing with base of the pyramid needs, it's difficult to self-actualize. You're so hungry, you're looking to meet payroll, you don't have support, you're struggling to convince people to support your work. It's difficult sometimes to reach out and say, look, let's do something together. Two people who are both struggling. So sometimes someone will come to me and want to partner, and I think, gosh, I would love to partner with you, but I need to partner with people who are much stronger than me so that I can have that support. So I would be curious to hear what the other players think, because really, I think 2 or 3 people have said that this is their life's work. This is the thing that they're committed to. And I feel like if this was all of our life's works and we found a way to band more closely together, we would accelerate our powers and our work and our impact in spite of the challenges. And I mean, the only thing I can think of is, Maslow's theory of needs is why we are not collaborating more. But I would be curious to hear if there are other reasons, because I really think that this, in the midst of the challenges that we face in terms of lack of support, this could be the way forward.
If I would just talk about Deborah is saying, or if I do not go first, yes,
go ahead, Jide.
So, Deborah, I do think you're right, but here's the thing. I think we've come to an age where a couple of us, like myself and yourself, have built capacity. You can't give out what you don't have, right? And for you to be able to give, you need to have the strength to give in the first place. There's a lot we need to do, but we all need to build certain foundations. So I know that I have certain resources that I can offer to you, and then you also need to have certain resources that you can offer, and so that it's mutually beneficial. I think one of the reasons why we also stay in silos is because everybody is looking at what they can get, but they're not exactly approaching it from the point of what they can give. And so if everybody comes to, okay, look, this is where I am, this is the structure I have, this is where I'm going to, is there any way that I can support you while you are supporting me, and not that I just need you to help me, and we can build something together to be able to get to a higher place? Then at that point in time, you see a lot of collaborations. And once we leave this whole mentality of I need you and I just need you to help me, instead of I have this to offer, do you have something to offer for us to build something uniquely beautiful? I think we'll start to get a lot of collaboration. And as a community, as a people, we're growing to a point where we're starting to build capacity, like I said before. And you start to see via platforms like this, a lot of collaborations coming together, but both parties stay genuine, both parties stay collaborative. You'll find more collaborations happening in the future.
Just to add to that, Mark, actually what we need to change is the mindset. I think also that everybody, I think collaborating is not something that we embrace. And I see that because, I remember times when I take clients to other galleries or introduce clients to fellow art professionals, they go, oh gosh, are you crazy? What if he goes off to the other gallery? I feel that there is enough for all of us. I've always believed in that. And so, our mind change we have this whole thing about quick fix, we don't have a long-term view or gratification to things. And that is what we need to work on, because COVID-19 has taught us that, collaboration is very important, that all the ideas that somebody might steal our clients or our ideas is it's in our imagination, it's not reality. Because if you're able to now come back to the same people and ask for collaboration, you could have done it before COVID. And so the mindset has to change, and the whole need to be open, to be community focused rather than individual, focus is what we need at the moment.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Now, the big watchword, this is Africa, on the 7th, it's Africa Integration Day, and the Boma Festival is all about leading up to that and about integration. I really see the drive of the African Union, the Afro champions and all other partners towards this more integrated Africa. I'm not just talking about trade, I'm talking about free movement and all the things that come with the word integration as being kind of a vital way for us to get past what is coming or what is indeed here with COVID-19, all the job losses, losses of lives, losses of livelihoods, and all those things that we're facing at the moment, this perfect storm that came upon us in 2020. Integration or regional integration can be a tool to a solution to many of those challenges. Storytelling and this sense of Africanness, Pan-African 2.0, storytelling plays a big part in regional integration, in binding us together. And there's a question that comes up in the chat that I want to sort of pose to my esteemed panel and see if anybody can tackle this question. This question comes from Ziad Hamoy, who asks, storytelling is a powerful tool to building our African identity. But my question to you is, do we have a consensus on a common African identity? If not, should we start? Anyone? Not an easy question, but you're a great panel, so someone's going to tackle it for sure. Who's going to go? Storytelling is a powerful tool to building our African identity, but the question is, do we have consensus on what indeed is a common African identity?
I'll go for it.
Oh, go on. Sorry.
Can I talk?
Yes, go for it. Yes, Herman.
I think my video is off.
Yes,
okay.
It is.
Okay, very simple. I don't think that it's even necessary to have some kind of agreement or consistency. The truth is the truth. If we create platforms where Africans can express themselves, our true identity will emerge. And it may not be what we think it is, but it will be true. So I don't think we should try to control it. We are who we are. Let's tell the world. And we will notice ourselves and realize ourselves who we are. Because Africa is quite diverse also. So I don't know that there can be a unified common position. It may be artificial. It may not work.
But there can be a common platforms and a common approaches or methods of approach. But
I say we have it, let it evolve and let that be the case.
Okay.
It'll be more authentic.
Let it evolve, yes.
Just to add to what Hammond said, most people, when you talk about Africa, most people think about tradition and custom, right? Yeah. My question is, what is tradition? What is custom?
Yeah.
Both of them, are ways of life. There's always a tradition at a point in time. There was a tradition and there's always a custom. It's the way people live, right? And so because of this holding on to tradition and custom, a lot of African stories are told from a mediocre point of view, right? We keep focusing on what Africa was a couple of 100 years ago. We're not talking about what Africa is today, and we're not even really visualizing what Africa could be. And this, creates hindrances. We're hindered in our perception of Africa. And again, we keep telling the story of when we were set back, and we're not talking about what our journey is today. So I would say, let us stick to, an identity of what really was at every point in time. If you're going to tell the story about, Europe or the US, there are different stages of their story, and they gladly let you know what happened at different stages. And so if we're going to talk about Africa and create this identity, we should classify it. This is how Western Nigeria, Western Africa, South Africa, Northern Africa was at this period. This is where we are today as a people. You don't really see, for example, people walking about the streets of any modern African country. And when I say modern, anywhere, with paintings on their faces. It just doesn't happen today, right? People actually wear African prints and still wear some kind of leather boots that they bought from some other country.
Yes.
Let that be the identity that we have today, because that is who we are, right? And let us be proud of who we were the days back when we were marking our faces. That is who we were then. This is who we are now. And then, as Harman said, when we morph into the time where we have geniuses from Africa creating spaceships, that is who we'll be then. So I believe that we don't need to have an identity that covers everything, but let's tell you how it was at every segment of time and in every area, because we're diverse. It's our diversity that makes us beautiful. Even in our clothing, the various prints, the various symbols, the various languages, it's those diversities that if we harness and bring it out truly, we can create a unified, diverse identity for each period of Africa. And we'll be able to plot a good one for the future. That's what I think.
But don't you think that the current time calls for considering how visceral and immediate our challenges in Africa are compared to the rest of the world, in terms of this, all the massive myriad of intense challenges and opportunities that we have in Africa, that art could be, storytelling could be even more courageous and bold? Or am I being unfair there? I quote Ben Okri again, who said storytellers ought not be too tame. He said they ought to be wild creatures whose function adequately in society. They're best in disguise, he said. If they lose their wildness, they cannot give us the truest joys. This is what Ben Okri said. And I think, do we call upon artists and storytellers to be bolder and more courageous, to reflect actually the immediacy of the challenges, and also to grab those young minds that you said that this has to be packaged because it's directly challenged by Western art and Western storytelling, and it has to be done in such a way that it's attractive. So is that an element, or am I being just too unfair and you're going to all tell me, it's courageous enough, it's bold enough, it doesn't have to be any more? I don't know. Ifoma.
Well, for me, Africa is a culture of cultures. And so we always have to bear that in mind. But when it comes to a united front, like the Jews do, they have internal fights and all that. But when it matters, they all present a united front. It is what we as Africans need to learn to do. It's not about imbibing or being one. What makes Africa interesting and great, it's not a country, it's a continent. It's the diverse cultures and traditions that we have there. And just going back to what you said, Mark, the thing is that our Africa, everything about Africa, our traditions and our history, not only influenced us, it influenced, the modern European art was developed through our traditions. So people like Picasso's and the Matisse's and the Braque of this world were influenced by African philosophy, our aesthetics and traditions. That was what they used. That was what informed their creativity. And so, yeah, exactly. So why are we confused? As I said, we just need to go back to our history because we can't move forward without knowing who we are. And yes, we have to go. It's 2020 today. We need to obviously think of Africa in today's terms, and of course the mindset has changed with the younger generation. I'm in London as well. I know a lot of young people in London that were born and raised in London of African heritage who are tired. They're all coming back. They're all doing their own research. They're wanting to find out about their place and doing something about it. And that just really makes me happy. I really believe in our youth, quite frankly, especially those of us who were born and raised, in the West. Because unlike us, I had my formative years in Nigeria, in Benin City, for example. And I was lucky to have a history teacher who happens to be part of the royal family. So I didn't get the diluted history. I understood our forebears and the strength in their, power and their achievements of, in those times. And so when I came to Europe with all the sort of discrimination one faced, in fact, I didn't even know when I was being discriminated against, because I thought it, my interpretation of all that was different. So as African, it is important to learn to trust ourselves again. And let me quote Chinua Achebe, one of our greatest storytellers, says, The white man is very clever. He came quietly and peacefully with his religion. We were amused at his foolishness and it allowed him to stay. Now he has won our brothers and our clan can no longer act like one. He has put a knife on the things that held us together and we have fallen apart. If you read Things Fall Apart, and that's that. And that's so true. But how do we change this? How do we get back to that whole community spirit that is in our DNA?
Through stories, amongst other things.
Yeah, and if I could just add really quickly to that, I think Jide made an interesting statement before, which is that, you know, it is not because we have created content for the marketplace that people will buy. They actually have to want it. Yeah. And so I think the other component is really understanding that the marketplace today is very varied. So in the space of children's books, children today want African sci-fi. They want Africans in space. They want traditional stories. They want funny stories. They want horror stories. And we have to be providing all of that. And all of those things are African identities. All of those things are things that they like. And so long as they're African and they like it, it is a part of their identity. So I think looking at it from the perspective of what the marketplace is demanding allows us to be able to expand the definition in a way that is more representative of who we are.
One thing we've not talked about in great detail when Debbie, and I know this is very important to you, is education and in the classroom. If I'd like to take us now into a classroom in any country, in any city, say, in any country or town in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, say, and we're there now, and you're looking. Recently, I had the opportunity to visit a school on the outskirts of Lagos, and now I schooled in Lagos, primary and secondary school education in the free education school in the 80s. And for me, it was like time traveling, going back and watching a class. This particular class was a science class. And I sat at the back and I watched as the teacher was teaching these children in a free education school, just like the one that I went to. And it was remarkable, you know, the teacher's expected to stand in front of the classroom like a preacher, while the classroom faces him or her like a congregation. The same way I was taught in Nigeria when I was the same age. And this engagement between teacher and class has been much reported and recorded, and it's attributed a lot of the facts that there's a lack of creative engagement with the students leads to poor performance because of that lack of engagement during the classroom instruction. And I think that, you know, how can we really create a revolution in storytelling, using storytelling methods and techniques, African storytelling methods that have been like oral tradition, that have been around for thousands of years, as vehicles to create a creative thinking with children. I know that this is something you've all probably spoken about before. And there are some simple methods, seating arrangements being one, use of local languages. I remember as a student, we would all be forced to speak English in class, and you'd be punished, you'd be beaten with a stick if you spoke in any language. And then the moment we got out into the playground, we were speaking Pidgin English or Yoruba or Igbo or whatever anybody else was speaking. So the kids were engaging themselves creatively with our own language. And then the moment you came back into this quarantine setup, this westernized quarantine setup of the classroom, you had to then follow and speak the Queen's English, so to speak, which restricted and sort of curtailed creativity to a great degree. So I would like all of you really to sort of give me some of your thoughts on how we can use storytelling as a means of creating an explosion of creative thinking amongst our young people in classrooms, because we're not doing that at the moment. Who wants to tackle that? Maybe I could go to...
I'd like to go.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'll keep it short. Because I am from the technology perspective, I'm coming from the technology angle. I think that the teachers in those schools are joking. In a matter of 5 years, they'll be disrupted. Nobody will go and sit in the classroom unless they're put in the classroom by force. Education will be democratized. My physics teacher may be from India. My math teacher may be from Germany. And what works is what will be used. Platforms, people like us are building platforms that will make that possible.
I think Herman is frozen. Are you back?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
In terms of creativity and so on, it will be learned because it will be available. Creative education, thinking out of the box kind of thing, it will be available. It will be available to everyone at a low cost over a phone. So that bottleneck will be removed. So it's not even worth talking about. It's gone. It's been disrupted. We're just in a bit of a lag, but it's gone.
So Herman says that the current teachers, the current teaching methods are prehistoric dinosaurs that don't know that that there's a meteorite heading towards them. How do the rest of you feel? Maybe Jide. Jide, you're on mute. Unmute yourself. Yes.
Sorry. All right. So to briefly tackle it from two perspectives. One is there's nothing we can do without proper infrastructure. That is the honest truth, right? If the governments of the day do not shift away from political issues and start to think about more, environmental development issues, then there are some things you just can't tackle as an individual. You can't build standard schools, for example. You can't import proper equipment and things like that. But from a creative point of view, I'll use my example. I know a lot about Greek mythology. Why? Because I like Thor from the Avengers, right? And because I wanted to understand the world of Thor and Odin, right? Because I saw them in Avengers, I went to do a bit of my Greek research and I was asking questions and I found out. So what if we're talking about diverse dimensions of space using people like Shango, Amadiora, using our traditional gods, but talking about things that matter, talking about science, talking about creation from the part of Olodumare, for example, right, created the earth, and he did this in 7 days, right? But other Western religions call him God. These people will be forced to go back and check who Olodumare is. Shango commands lightning and thunder, and lightning works this way. Thunder works this way. And you have illustrations, for example, with what I do, comic books, where you have, superheroes or women who look very interesting, funny, something that they would normally see in a Disney movie, explaining science. We have our tech superheroes saying, look, to create this chemical reaction, you have to mix sulfate and this together. And you will catch these people at the point where they really want to. And then, let's go away from this classroom approach, right? There's nothing wrong with classroom approach where you spend 1 hour, but you give these children, you tell them, go and do your assignment on this online. You create online platforms that look interesting, engaging. We actually spend money on IT platforms that will act like Instagram, where people can chat with each other in the classroom and at the same time build groups in the classroom where they can chat with each other, have fun, and at the same time do their homework. Those are the things we need to do, but there are some things that infrastructure can only do. Like Harman said, it's easy for him to create a platform where we can share audio books because people have created the internet. People have developed mobile phones that allow us to download apps. These things could not have been done by individuals, but by huge corporations that have built over years. In our community, we need the leadership to step up, bring the infrastructure, and let the individuals shine.
Ifoma is clapping. That's good. I like it when one panelist claps for the other panelists. You have the floor, Ifoma.
I actually believe in applying what works for whom. And I think if you're going to teach children, you need to have an understanding of how they learn, because it will vary, per child. And also still going back to our roots, because the whole idea of tales by moonlight, children are excited about, things that happen outdoor. All the learning does not always have to happen in the classrooms. Yeah. The whole outside the classroom learning is wonderful. There are ways in which you could teach children, even, that whole team building thing and leadership in the sort of activities that you could do outside the classroom. And so I think our teachers have to be a bit more creative in their teaching style and need to educate themselves about that, really. That's just what I have in a nutshell.
Debbie, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, just a few words. I think that stories have a massive role to play in the educational goals that we have as a continent. So if you look at SDG 4 of quality education and the targets that we hope to reach, I strongly believe that literacy and being able to read is the foundation of education. And in this world of so much uncertainty about what the future of education holds, like Herman is saying, it could be completely disrupted by technology. And 3 years and 5 years and 10 years, we have no idea. But regardless of what form it takes, the principles will remain. And the core principle of being able to seek and gain knowledge and retain it in this world is to start with being able to seek. And how do you seek knowledge if you can't read? So we have a massive literacy challenge where across the continent, we are trying to get children to be able to read and write. I think that if you give children content they want, then they'll come back to read. If you're teaching me to read and you're giving me Shakespeare, which I don't understand, how am I going to come back to it? How am I going to think that this is a thing that's worth my while? But if we're teaching children to read and giving them content that they want, that they relate to, that speaks to their experiences and their interest, then they come back to it. And I think it's such an easy thing to insert into the equation and such a cheap and affordable add-on that I would love, to be able to see more of that. And I would love for people in development, when they're looking to do literacy work, to speak to commercial content creators who understand what it takes to create content that delights and captivates their imagination, rather than do it by themselves or rather than do it from the perspective of development.
Mm. Thanks, Debbie. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm told that we have a special guest on this call. I don't know if she's available to join us. Rosemary Okello is from Strathmore University, which has been a great partner in putting together this BOMA festival. She's the director of Africa Media Hub at Strathmore University. And I know that there she is. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okello. And I'm sure you've been listening to our great panel of very, very passionate friends who've been talking from their own particular angles about the power of African storytelling and art. And you've heard some level of frustration and optimism all blended together. I just want you to step in and say a few words, please, and a reaction from you.
Thank you so much. And I resonate with all the views that have been shared. And having been actually a media specialist in the region and worked with various organizations, storytelling indeed is actually an economic development that we've ignored for a long time as a region. And just making us go outside the box. How is it amazing that Hollywood actually foresaw coronavirus and made it into a movie, and policymakers did not take it into action. And they even actually insinuated how coronavirus was going to affect the countries. And that's why I'm saying that storytelling is not just an art, it's a science, and also is a way that abets how we actually make decisions and how we make our reasoning, especially when it comes to the youth. As a continent that will be actually largely populated by the youth, we need to start actually, when you talk about education, and I liked the way Herman came out and said that actually education, people are joking. Indeed, we are joking because we've not actually invested enough in this sector. First of all, UNESCO in 2013 foresaw creative economy as actual engine growth, and I gave a whole way in which, if embraced properly, we were going to make a lot of money. None of the universities or primary education actually came with curriculum that can be able to collectively bring education of creative economy and storytelling from all the way to Cape to Cairo. What we see is the young people trying to come out silencing themselves, especially in startup. And that's why we've seen animators, we're using the new technology coming up to tell the African story, but African story based on Western world story. It was amazing that late last year, a leader of French Institute of Research came to me because Strathmore, we have an iLab where we give the youth where they can actually experiment, and ask me how can the Strathmore students do animation on how to actually attract development around sustainable development. And when we announced it, 5 youth came up and they're already been engaged, and more 10 youth have been engaged in Belgium, telling their stories using our actually intellectual rights that we have. The other thing that I want to say, the intellectual property rights. When we say we want to tell our African stories, do we even try to see how we are going to actually copyright it? The Maasai cloth that is actually now being used all over has been copyrighted in Britain.
Yes.
Many of our work has been copyrighted in the Western world. And then we say that we still cannot reinvent ourselves using our African story when other people are using our culture and arts to actually leverage their development. The last thing I want to comment on is actually, as we go forward, how can we make actually art and culture and especially storytelling become the engine of the 4th industrial estate revolution? When we look at historically how revolution emerged, the growth of the first industrial revolution was driven by engineering. The second was through electricity and production lines. The third was by technology and information. The fourth one is actually should be storytelling, using animation, using actually technology that has come to us and human, because robots will be here and robots cannot be actually be used without technology. And this where as Strathmore, we are proud to announce that our students that has been spearheaded by Uwor Diana, Ayego Ezra, Gishuru Kevin, are actually developed a program on how can we mentor the young trade professionals using Africa innovation and Africa storytelling. And this is actually will be kind of spearheaded by the Youth Entrepreneurship Association organized by Wycliffe Gugun in Strathmore. But still we need a structured, we need policymakers, we need partners to understand that unless we invest in this sector, this revolution is going to leave us. Our storytelling that is so rich and so embraced by other parts of the world is going to be used by other people the way we are seeing Maasai cloth being used by other people, and we're not going to actually leverage on it. I want to end, I worked with the Ford Foundation and we previously, and we invested a lot around culture and storytelling. And the president then, we see the president, Darren Walker, say that I start the assumption that each of us in our own ways recognize and accept art as one of the most profound tools of capturing and expressing the human experience. It is intrinsic to who we are, just as not a language itself. The fact art and storytelling precede language as form of human expression. Every writer, artist, musician, performers, and storytellers has asserted this functional truth, both through their art and through their efforts to explain. And all the people who are panelists here actually express how they've been telling this story. And I want to remind us, as we do this, let's not forget the grandmother storytelling or the round table, the elders round table, how they used to pass knowledge. It's not only about reading and writing, it's also about hearing. And grandmother storytelling was very, very important, that if you can capture in our new innovative technology, can go a long way in reinventing Africa through storytelling. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosemary Okello from Strathmore University. I also want to say thank you to a great panel. I wish we had more time, but we're completely out of time. Deborah, Herman, Ifoma, and Jide for those great interventions. Now, I'm just going to show you a video at the end. I want to end with a promo from Unanimous Games. This is the brainchild of Rock Nation, who you will know is Jay-Z's company. UG is a Black-owned, New York-based esports company. It currently has most of their developers on the continent, and they're going to be launching a game later this year. Their UG education platform teaches kids a crash course on how to build mobile games, and will be expanded to teaching kids how to code, build drones, and build supercomputers. If I could ask us to end by rolling that promo. Thanks a lot for a great conversation. You were a great panel. Show the film.
I interrupt this broadcast.
My name is Tyra Nahoro. I'm the COO of Unanimous Games.
Hi, and my name is Aya Osman, Director of Education at Unanimous Games.
Unanimous Games is a Black-owned, full-service esports company based out of New York City. We specialize in education, talent management, mobile game development, original content creation, and esports activations, both live.
Where we have recognized that learning via gaming is a growing field which can be utilized to help descendants of Africa all over the world learn about African history via gaming, as well as picking up on other important skills such as coding in a fun and creative way.
Our focus is to make sure communities of color have the opportunities, the access, and the skills to have a presence in this industry.
Education and knowledge are key.
So it is UG's mission to give an amplified voice to communities of color to be seen, heard, and valued, where we can go from being solely consumers and actually have ownership and taking part in growing this industry. For more information on Unanimous Games, go to www.unanimousgames.com.
C'était le dernier ticket, il fallait coûte que coûte l'avoir.
Aujourd'hui, c'est l'avenir de notre basketball qui est en jeu.
Avec tous ces soutiens, on n'avait pas droit à l'échec.
Considérez-vous aujourd'hui comme des soldats qui partent en guerre pour défendre les couleurs de notre pays.
Nous avons su nous battre et montrer à toute l'Afrique qu'on représente le Mali, on a le cœur d'aller. Vraiment, je veux dire bravo à ces guerriers qui ont vraiment su relever le défi, c'est-à-dire se qualifier et vraiment honorer le Mali sur le plan continental.
C'était difficile, le parcours il était long pour un club malien amateur. Arriver jusqu'ici, c'est super quoi.
Beaucoup d'émotions, avec des larmes aux yeux, de joie. Tout le monde a pleuré. Vraiment, c'était une grande émotion de joie, de fierté, de reconnaissance.
J'ai pensé à un beau nombre de basketteurs au Mali qui jouent, qui se battent nuit et jour. Sans mis les larmes aux yeux, vraiment. C'était super.
Mais on pensait aux gens qui sont derrière nous, au pays qui nous attendent. C'est ce qui donne des larmes aux yeux.
En gros, c'est le Mali qui a gagné, c'est le basket malien et les jeunes vont regarder ça. Ils ont vu le match et espérons que ça les encourage à prendre le basket plus au sérieux. la balle va vraiment aider le basketball africain.
Je salue cette initiative de la NBA qui vient vraiment épauler le basketball africain.
En collaboration avec FIBA Afrique, ça va plus nous aider à exporter notre talent au niveau international.
Nous, les jeunes africains, nous voulons tous partir à l'Europe ou à l'NBA pour être professionnalisés. Si la NBA et la FIBA viennent vers chez nous, je pense que ça, c'est une bonne initiative. Et ça nous sort plus le basket africain à progresser.
Et maintenant, avec BAL, on se sent à moitié à l'NBA. C'est quelque chose d'énorme.
Et là, on peut faire du basket notre job.